Along the Tidewater forests of Maryland, where rivers spill into low-lying swamps and mist rolls endlessly through the trees, there are roads the world seems to have forgotten. Leaves rustle without wind. Branches creak as if touched by invisible hands. And the air carries a chill that has nothing to do with the weather. These roads once connected farms, towns, and trading posts. Travelers passed through during day and night. Carriages creaked. Horses pawed. And lanterns swayed gently against the shadows. But something changed. Accidents happened more often than they should. Figures appeared on the roadside with no origin. Locals say the forest remembers every scream, every lost footstep, every secret buried along the water and under the roots. Those who drive these roads after sunset report seeing ghostly lights in the trees, hearing whispers carried by the wind, and feeling the weight of unseen eyes watching them from the shadows. Tonight, we will journey down the most haunted Tidewater forest roads in Maryland. 20 forgotten paths where the past refuses to stay buried, and the forest itself seems alive. If you were driving alone on a deserted forest road and saw a flickering lantern light appear among the trees ahead, would you stop to investigate it, or would you keep driving and hope the forest does not follow? Take a slow breath. The trees are closer than they appear. Hello, my dear friend. I am truly grateful you are here with me tonight. Before we begin, settle yourself. Let your shoulders drop. Allow the rhythm of your breathing to slow. Maryland's Tidewater forests are known for their beauty. Trade, travel, and survival once depended on these roads. But accidents and disappearances were common. Some roads were abandoned when towns moved. Others were left because too many never returned. Wooden bridges rotted. Signs faded into the undergrowth. And the forest began to hold its own memories. Even today, locals avoid these roads at night. They speak of sudden fog that seems to appear without warning. Of lights appearing in the distance, then vanishing when approached. Tonight, I will guide you through 20 of the most haunted Tidewater forest roads in Maryland. Each one shaped by isolation, history, and the restless presence of those who never left. And before we take our first step into the forest, let me ask you something. If you found yourself alone on a deserted forest road and saw a shadowy figure standing in the middle of the path, would you approach to see who it is, or would you stay in your vehicle and drive past as quickly as you could? Black Cypress Hollow stretches along a narrow valley, its road winding between thick stands of cypress trees. Once the main route for local farms, it carried wagons, carts, and travelers moving between fields and towns. Over time, the road fell into disuse, yet its worn surface and moss-covered edges remain visible beneath layers of fallen leaves and creeping roots. Travelers report sudden drops in temperature. Driving or walking along the hollow, the air can shift dramatically. One moment the temperature is mild and steady, and the next it feels sharply colder, pressing against the skin. Windows fog over, breath becomes visible, and a chill settles deep into the bones. The change is immediate, as though the valley itself inhales and exhales, bringing a heavy presence along with the cold. Footsteps echo behind vehicles. Those traveling the road have heard the unmistakable sound of boots or shoes striking the pavement. Wheels crunch over gravel, and yet the echoes seem to multiply behind them. There is a rhythm, matching their own movements precisely, but when they stop to look, no one is visible. The hollow remains empty. Branches form an overhead canopy, blocking moonlight and fading the horizon. Shadows deepen and twist across the pavement, distorted by trunks and leaves. The sense of being followed intensifies here, the echoes louder, the chill sharper. Travelers often feel compelled to move faster, though the cold seems to press against the brake and accelerator equally. Animals avoid the hollow at night. Owls remain silent in their roosts. Deer retreat to the underbrush. Even insects are scarce, leaving the air unusually still and amplifying every sound. From tires crunching over gravel to branches scraping against a vehicle. The sensation of being observed is subtle but persistent. Nothing is seen in the shadows, yet the mind registers presence. A slight movement in peripheral vision is immediately followed by the sound of footsteps. The hollow seems aware, attentive to those who pass through, yet it remains entirely empty. Fog often rolls in unexpectedly. Mists rise from the damp ground and cling to the trees, drifting across the road. Visibility is reduced to a few meters. Light from headlights or lanterns scatters, illuminating particles in the air. Within this haze, echoes become more pronounced, footsteps sounding closer and heavier, though no source appears. The road reacts to vehicles. Observers report a strange amplification of sound. Engines seem to rumble differently, tires hiss and crunch in odd patterns, and even the weight of a car seems exaggerated. Stopping does not change the perception, the echoes continue, perfectly synchronized to the Traveller's movements. Locals provide warnings quietly. Those who live near the hollow speak of it with caution. They advise travel only when necessary and recommend avoiding the road at night. Stories recount travelers suddenly feeling cold and hearing steps behind them, as if shadows themselves had taken to walking the path. The phenomenon has been consistent for decades. Drivers and pedestrians from different generations report the same experiences. Cold spots, echoes, and a sense of presence occur repeatedly, independent of weather or season. Even those unfamiliar with local lore notice the uncanny effects. The trees seem to shape the experience. Cypress trunks lean and curve over the road, forming uneven tunnels. Gaps between them cast moving shadows in the headlights. Branches shift subtly in the windless air, adding to the impression that the forest itself is alive and responsive. Moments can stretch, minutes feeling like hours. Stops for observation produce disorientation, and the echoes continue, creating a loop of sound and awareness that feels inescapable. Until the road finally emerges into open farmland. Attempts to explain the echoes are incomplete. Acoustic effects may play a role, with trunks and ground reflecting sound. Yet they cannot fully account for the precise synchronization with movement or the sudden drops in temperature. The hollow's influence seems to extend beyond ordinary physics, interacting with perception in ways that defy explanation. Travelers report leaving the hollow with lingering impressions. The sensation of being followed, the sudden cold, and the shifting shadows remain in memory long after exiting the trees. Even during daylight, some recall the rhythmic echo of footsteps and the oppressive chill as if the hollow's presence lingers. The road remains largely unused today. Farm traffic has moved to paved routes, and the old path through Black Cypress Hollow is quiet most of the time. Yet its atmosphere persists. The hollow retains its echoes, its cold. It's cold, and the sense that it observes all who pass through. The hollow bridges past and present. The road once vital for farmers now exists as a place of subtle mystery, carrying memory in its wood, leaves, and cypress trees. Travelers are warned not by signs or fences, but by the feeling of footsteps behind them. And the sudden drop in temperature that reminds them that some places hold remnants of the past in ways that remain active, unseen, and deeply felt. Black Cypress Hollow endures as a space where the ordinary intersects with the uncanny. Cold presses against the skin. Footsteps echo perfectly in time. Shadows stretch along the boards and the road beneath the trees. And even when no one is visible, the hollow communicates its presence, demanding awareness, respect, and caution from all who travel through its mist and darkness. Fogwater Lane winds tightly along a tidal creek, narrow and bordered by reeds, twisted trees, and low banks that dip into dark, still water. The path is soft with mud, scattered leaves, and occasional driftwood, evidence of high tides and recent storms. Even in daylight, the lane feels enclosed, shadows pooling beneath dense branches that arch overhead. At night, the lane transforms. Lantern lights appear along the roadside, soft and glowing in the fog. They float just above the ground, drifting slowly with the mist. Their light illuminates reeds, mud, and the surface of the creek in brief glimpses. But the source is never revealed. No hand holds the lantern. No pole supports it. They exist independently, suspended in space and time. The lights move gently. They drift along the lane in a subtle rhythm, appearing closer and then farther away. Walking toward a lantern does not change its position. Turning the head or slowing steps does not bring clarity. The glow remains elusive, intangible, as if the fog itself carries it. Fog amplifies the effect. Mist thickens at night along the tidal creek, softening shapes and diffusing light. The lanterns appear brighter against the gray, creating the impression of small orbs moving slowly along the edge of perception. Reflections on water shimmer slightly, enhancing the illusion of motion and depth. Visitors report a strange stillness. Sound is muted along the lane. Water laps quietly, wind rustles the reeds softly, but normal night noises are subdued. The floating lanterns dominate perception, drawing attention and creating a heightened awareness of space, light, and movement. The lights do not interact physically. They pass through trees and reeds without obstruction. They float over mud and water without touching the surface. Shadows fall naturally from branches and banks, yet the lanterns cast no discernible shadow of their own. The glow is independent, almost spectral in nature. The experience is subtle but compelling. Travelers walking the lane feel a pull toward the lights, an urge to follow or approach them. The movement is calm, almost hypnotic, and it can be disorienting. Some report losing track of time or distance while observing the lanterns, the fog blending reality with perception. Stopping does not dissipate the phenomenon. Even when standing still for long moments, the lanterns continue their slow drift along the roadside. Moving backward or forward alters nothing. Their presence is constant and consistent, independent of human attention. The lights vary in number and intensity. Sometimes a single lantern appears. Other times multiple lights emerge, spaced along the lane, drifting together or independently. Their glow fluctuates subtly, brightening or dimming with no clear cause. The effect is organic, natural, yet undeniably unnatural in its consistency and behavior. No physical evidence exists. The ground shows no footprints or marks of movement associated with the lights. Reeds and mud remain undisturbed. Observers may reach toward a lantern and find only fog and air, nothing tangible. The experience exists entirely in perception, anchored by the visual and atmospheric presence of the lane itself. The creek enhances the atmosphere. Tidal water reflects the glow of the lanterns, producing doubled or distorted images. Visitors report a heightened sense of awareness. Breathing feels louder. Footsteps echo softly on the mud. Peripheral vision is acute, picking up faint movement that may not exist. The lane, the fog, and the lanterns dominate perception, creating the impression of being watched or guided along the path. Attempts to capture the phenomenon are limited. Photographs may record diffuse points of light, but video rarely conveys the movement, depth, or ethereal quality described by observers. Local knowledge suggests caution. Those familiar with Fogwater Lane advise travelers to respect the space. Follow the path carefully. Observe the lights without attempting to chase them. The lane is narrow, the banks unstable, and the fog can disorient, but it is also a place of wonder and quiet mystery. The lanterns persist over time. Night after night, visitors report similar experiences. Lights appear at consistent heights, drift along the same roadside, and vanish when approached. The fog carries them, shaping perception in subtle and haunting ways. Leaving the lane restores normal perception. As distance from the tidal creek increases, the glow fades. Fog thins. Water and reeds resume ordinary movement. The effect diminishes gradually, leaving memory intact but experience intangible. Looking back, the lane appears ordinary. Twisted trees, mud, and water stretch along the shore. No light is visible. Yet the memory of floating lanterns remains. A quiet reminder of a place where perception and environment converge in a delicate, mysterious rhythm. Fogwater Lane endures. Its narrow path winds along the tidal creek. Mist drifts over water and mud. Lantern lights float silently in the fog, independent of source or cause. Visitors carry the memory, aware that the lane exists beyond ordinary perception. A place of quiet wonder and subtle mystery where the intangible becomes undeniably real. The road to Widow's Bend winds through low marshland, bordered by dense reeds and stagnant water that reflects the gray sky above. The ground is soft and uneven, and in places, shallow pools form where rain collects. A chill lingers in the air, even on warm days, as if the swamp holds memory of events long past. Travelers describe the path as narrow and isolating, with the silence broken only by occasional rustle of reeds or the distant call of birds. The road earned its name for tragic reasons. Years ago, a series of drownings occurred along the bend. People walking near the water's edge were pulled under mysteriously, often when fog or low light obscured the surroundings. The events left a lasting mark on the local community, giving the road a reputation for danger and sorrow. Figures began appearing. Those traveling the path report seeing women in black dresses standing at the edge of the swamp. They are tall, thin, and motionless, with clothing dark against the muted colors of reeds and water. Their presence is sudden, often visible only for a moment before being noticed fully. Observers describe the figures as solemn, their posture rigid, as if awaiting something. Approaching the figures produces the same result each time. Step forward, and they vanish. There is no sound of movement, no disturbance of reeds, no trace of footprints. The swamp remains undisturbed, leaving the observer with the impression that the figures were never there, yet the memory of their form remains vivid. The effect is amplified in low light. Fog, dusk, and overcast skies enhance the perception of the figures. The air feels heavier. Sounds are muffled, except for subtle, distant noises that are difficult to locate. Each step along the path heightens the awareness of unseen presence. Travelers describe sensations of unease. The swamp seems to press in, narrowing the field of vision. Movements in the reed suggest more than one figure, though only a single shape is visible at a time. Observers report a chill along the spine, the instinct to turn back, and a focus entirely drawn toward the water's edge. The ground is stable. There are no other travelers or locals in proximity during these sightings. Weather conditions vary, yet the figures appear consistently during fog, rain, and twilight. The behavior of the swamp itself does not change in a way that could mimic human forms. Local legend offers context. Some say the women are spirits of those who drowned, bound to the place where life ended abruptly. Others suggest they are warnings, manifestations of the road's history meant to deter travelers from venturing too close to the water. In either case, the appearances carry weight and presence beyond ordinary perception. Observers note a consistency. The figures always appear at the edge of the swamp, never within the reeds or on the path itself. Maintaining distance from anyone approaching, vanishing before physical contact can occur. Their posture and clothing remain the same across multiple sightings, creating a recognizable pattern for those who witness them. Time and perception shift along the road. Standing near the swamp, the mind focuses entirely on the figures. Sound and light seem altered. Shadows extend unnaturally. Observers report that minutes feel longer, as though the swamp stretches time to prolong awareness. Movement becomes slower, deliberate, as attention is drawn inward. Animals respond to the presence. Birds avoid the immediate edge of the swamp. Small mammals remain hidden. Fish retreat to deeper water. The natural behavior of creatures is altered subtly, reinforcing the sense that the figures and the swamp hold influence over the environment. Sightings are most common during quiet hours. Early morning or late evening produce the clearest observations. The fog and low light create conditions where perception is heightened. The figures appear more solid, the swamp more silent, and the sense of being observed stronger. The effect does not harm. The figures do not chase, speak, or interact in a threatening manner. There is no force applied. The experience is purely visual and psychological, yet profoundly affecting. The bend, the edge of the swamp, and the memory of past drownings create an atmosphere of reverence and wariness. Witnesses who return describe the same sequence. Figures appear. Approaches result in disappearance. The swamp remains unchanged. The effect is consistent and repeatable, reinforcing the notion that the road and its edge are a space apart, where memory and presence intersect. The path to Widow's Bend endures. It is narrow and quiet, bordered by still water and dense reeds. Figures in black dresses appear at the edge, solemn and immobile. Travelers are drawn by curiosity, guided by caution, and reminded that some roads carry the weight of history and memory. A presence that is seen yet unreachable, a warning embedded in the landscape itself. Owl's Watch Road winds through a dense forest, a narrow path flanked by tall trees whose branches twist toward the sky. The road is uneven, strewn with fallen leaves and occasional stones, and the canopy above filters sunlight into long, shifting shadows. Even in the daytime, the forest feels alive, filled with the subtle sounds of wind, distant birds, and the soft rustle of leaves. Visitors immediately notice the unusual movement above. Branches sway and bend as if something large is climbing through them. The motion is deliberate, not random, each bend and snap in rhythm with unseen weight shifting from limb to limb. Footsteps echo faintly through the foliage, yet when observers look upward, there is nothing, no shape or shadow to identify. The forest above seems occupied and yet completely empty. The sounds are persistent. Rustling continues along the path ahead and behind, following visitors as they move. Even when the wind dies, the movement in the canopy persists, leaves trembling without cause, branches creaking under imagined pressure. Those who pause report a heightened awareness. Every crack of wood, every whisper of foliage becomes significant. Shadows deepen and lengthen, subtle changes in light creating the illusion of form. Observers describe a sense of being watched, a quiet attention that does not feel threatening but undeniable. The effect intensifies at dusk. As light fades, shadows blend, and the forest becomes a lattice of dark forms against gray skies. Sounds carry differently. Rustling branches echo with startling clarity, footsteps imagined or real seem amplified, and every slight motion above draws focus. Some visitors report the sensation of movement following them from tree to tree, tracking their progress along the road. Travelers often experience a tug between curiosity and caution. The movement overhead compels observation, leaving observers with heightened focus but no resolution. A feeling that each step is measured by unseen scrutiny. Wind and branches combine to produce faint echoes, shadows of movement, and hints of form that appear and disappear. Even small animals seem cautious, their calls muted, their activity limited to the periphery. The effect is cumulative, layering natural sounds with perceptual ambiguity, producing a persistent sense of being observed. Some visitors describe physical responses. Muscles tense, breathing slows or quickens unexpectedly, and a low awareness of posture emerges. The mind attempts to rationalize the sounds and movement, searching for a figure, an animal, or a branch falling. Yet the logical explanation is elusive, and the body reacts to perception rather than evidence, creating tension alongside curiosity. Attempts to document Owl's Watch Road yield limited results. Cameras capture trees, shadows, and branches, but not the precise movement described by observers. Audio recordings often record rustling, but they cannot reproduce the sense of presence that accompanies it. The phenomena appear linked to direct observation and human perception, subtle cues and context that mechanical recording fails to replicate. Local accounts offer insight into the road's reputation. Residents and hikers tell stories of travelers stopping suddenly, listening to branches bend and rustle above, only to move on after feeling watched. Some claim to have glimpsed shapes from the corner of the eye, fleeting and undefined, and to have turned quickly, only to find nothing. The road is known for its quiet authority, its ability to draw attention skyward and maintain it without ever revealing a source. Night intensifies the sense of presence. Moonlight filters unevenly through the canopy, creating a patchwork of light and shadow. Rustling persists, sometimes directly above, sometimes along the sides of the road. The forest seems alive in a way that defies explanation, an environment responsive and attentive, without threat, yet compelling respect. Those who linger describe a strong memory afterward. Even after leaving the road, they recall the subtle motion, the sway of branches, and the echo of rustling above. The experience lingers in awareness, shaping the perception of future forests, enhancing alertness to movement, and leaving a sense of having shared space with something beyond ordinary observation. Owl's Watch Road remains a place of quiet mystery. The path is simple, the trees are ordinary, yet the experience is profound. Sound, shadow, and movement. No figure ever appears, yet the forest communicates presence through subtle cues, timing, and the gentle sway of branches under imagined weight. At Owla South Watch Road, the line between natural and unexplained blurs. Rustling branches, bending limbs, and shifting shadows create a space where perception and reality intersect. Travelers are compelled to observe, to respect, and to move with awareness, leaving the forest attentive and unchanged, yet deeply remembered. The path endures, the trees sway, and the watchers remain, invisible yet undeniable above the road, maintaining their quiet vigil for all who pass beneath. Shallow Tideway Road winds through a dense forest, often disappearing beneath shallow pools of water after seasonal rains. The path was once a simple route for farmers and villagers, connecting homesteads and small settlements. But over time sections have become permanently flooded, leaving a network of waterlogged tracks and half-submerged trees. The road appears ordinary by day, a narrow trail through wet earth and leaning cypress. Yet travelers report an unusual sensation when passing through after dark. Drivers describe the strange impression of gentle force against their cars, as if something beneath the water is guiding them. Waters ripple as if someone just stepped into them. Small waves form around tires and along the edges of flooded sections, rising without visible disturbance. Pebbles and mud shift, creating soft sounds that echo through the trees. Observers often glance to the banks and shallow channels, expecting movement, but see only water and foliage. The forest is dense and quiet. Cypress and mangrove roots rise from the water, their trunks twisted and gnarled. Low branches brush against vehicles and obscure sightlines. Birds and small animals retreat from the flooded path, leaving the forest unusually silent. Even the sound of running water seems muted, making the ripples and splashes caused by the unseen presence more pronounced. Fog often forms over the road. Mist rises from the shallow waters at dusk, settling across planks, mud, and roots. Visibility drops to only a few meters. Headlights pierce through the fog, revealing patterns of light and shadow that appear to move independently. The sensation of being guided and observed is heightened. Travelers notice vehicles accelerating slightly without input. Steering seems easier, almost assisted, yet every driver feels alert to the possibility of misjudging submerged obstacles. The road appears alive, interacting with those who traverse it while remaining entirely unmoved in daylight. Water levels affect perception. Deeper pools produce stronger ripples, while shallow sections amplify the sensation of force. Observers report that the pushing feeling is stronger at the center of flooded areas and less pronounced near dry patches. The effect is consistent across seasons, independent of wind or rain. The forest reacts to presence. Branches sway gently, even in calm air. Water shimmers and ripples without wind. Sounds are altered, with splashes and echoes coming from no discernible source. The forest feels aware, its rhythm synchronized with the movements of travelers passing through the water. Attempts to investigate are inconclusive. Walking through the shallow water produces ripples, but nothing approaches or makes contact. Cameras capture reflections and distortion in the water, but no tangible figure is recorded. The sensation of guidance remains perceptible only to those present, fading once the forest and road are left behind. The phenomenon does not harm. No injuries or direct contact occur. The water remains shallow, and the force guiding vehicles is gentle. Yet the experience leaves a lasting impression, creating tension and respect for the road and its flooded sections. The path appears ordinary by day. Shallow pools reflect sunlight, leaves drift across the water, and tree roots remain exposed. They advise travelers to remain cautious, maintain steady speeds, and avoid prolonged stops in deep pools. Stories passed down over decades describe vehicles feeling lighter or heavier, water ripples appearing suddenly, and a quiet presence guiding movement through flooded sections. The road links past and present. Shallow Tideway Road retains memory of its use as a vital route, while accommodating the Forsta's persistent floods. The nightly phenomena connect travelers to a hidden rhythm of the landscape, reminding them that some places hold forces beyond observation, shaping motion and perception quietly and persistently. The forest and water maintain a delicate balance. Roots and submerged trees anchor the road, while water levels shift with tides and rainfall. Shadows stretch across the path, and reflections ripple unpredictably. The interplay of light, water, and unseen presence creates a space where ordinary travel intersects with something extraordinary. Travelers leave with lasting impressions. The feeling of being guided, the subtle ripples in water, and the pressure on vehicles remain in memory long after the journey ends. The road and forest continue their quiet rhythm, independent of human presence yet intimately connected to those who pass through. The shallow Tideway Road endures as a place of mystery. Vehicles glide gently, waters ripple without cause, and the forest observes silently. The road remains a corridor of subtle phenomena, where unseen hands influence movement, shadows linger in fog, and the shallow flooded path becomes a bridge between ordinary perception and the extraordinary patterns of the natural world. Those who travel it at night understand its rhythm. They feel the push of water, see ripples form without explanation, and notice the quiet awareness of the forest. Shallow Tideway Road is both a journey and a living experience. A path where the land, water, and unseen forces converge, leaving travelers with a lasting impression of presence, motion, and mystery. Deadman's Hollow stretches along a narrow highway where fog rolls in from surrounding hills, thick and persistent. The road curves sharply between dense trees and low embankments, creating blind corners and long shadows that reach across the asphalt. The surface is cracked and worn, evidence of abandonment, with weeds sprouting through the fissures and roadside signs faded beyond recognition. The path was deserted after a series of accidents. Vehicles vanished, collisions occurred with no survivors, and the hollow gained a reputation for danger. Local authorities eventually closed sections of the road, leaving it to the elements. Over time, the hollow became isolated, cut off from regular travel, and steeped in quiet. Lights flicker along the roadway. Even when power is absent, dim glows appear intermittently. Street lamps, signs, and distant headlights seem to ignite for a brief moment, illuminating the fog and road in a way that feels deliberate. The flickering is unpredictable, appearing and vanishing in seconds, leaving observers uncertain if they saw anything at all. Shadowy figures follow in the mist. They are vague, human-shaped, and silent. Standing or walking along the road, visitors report glimpses of movement at the edges of vision. Turning quickly reveals only fog, trees, or empty asphalt. The figures seem to maintain pace with travelers, appearing closer when observed and retreating when attention focuses elsewhere. The fog amplifies their presence. It softens outlines, blurs details, and creates an impression of depth that may not exist. A figure that seems just beyond the shoulder may vanish entirely when approached, leaving a sense of absence where presence was expected. The air feels heavy, humid, and slightly chilled, heightening awareness of each step and breath. The environment is isolated. Stopping does not end the phenomena. Standing still, lights continue to flicker, and shadowy figures remain at the edges of vision. Sound is muted except for the wind through trees and the occasional rustle of leaves. Each flicker of light, each movement in the fog, feels significant. Peripheral vision captures fleeting images, reinforcing a sense of being followed. The flickering lights vary in intensity. Some glows are faint, barely perceptible. Others blaze briefly, illuminating the road, trees, and fog in startling clarity before vanishing. They appear in patterns that feel intentional, though no power source or mechanism can be identified. Shadowy figures remain indistinct. They appear humanoid but lack clear features. Sometimes multiple forms can be glimpsed moving in unison. Their presence is felt more strongly than seen. Observers often describe a sense of weight, pressure, or scrutiny, as if the figures are measuring attention or intent. Attempts to record the phenomena rarely succeed. Cameras and audio devices capture ambient fog, wind, and faint echoes, but the flickering lights and shadows do not appear clearly. Local accounts warn of caution. Those familiar with Deadman's Hollow speak quietly of lights and shadows, advising travelers to proceed slowly and respectfully. They recount incidents of disorientation, sudden chills, and the feeling of being followed without explanation. The hollow is approached with reverence, as a place of history, hazard, and subtle presence. Time feels distorted along the path. Minutes stretch and contract unpredictably. The hollow seems to bend perception subtly, aligning attention with the phenomena rather than physical space alone. Cracked pavement, leaning trees, and reflective puddles combine with flickering light and fog to create an immersive effect. Ordinary features, like roadside signs or embankments, take on an unusual prominence when observed in the context of lights and shadowy figures. Departing gradually restores normal perception. Walking back along the hollow, shadows recede, fog thins, and flickering lights vanish. The road appears empty, silent, and abandoned once more. Yet the memory of presence remains, vivid and unsettling. Looking back reveals only the quiet hollow. Cracked asphalt stretches along the fog-shrouded path. Trees sway lightly in the breeze. No figures are visible. No lights flicker. The hollow appears dormant, yet those who leave carry the impression of having been observed, guided, and followed in a space where the ordinary rules of perception do not fully apply. Deadman's Hollow endures. Lantern Bridge Road winds through a low, swampy area where water pools between dense reeds and moss-covered trees. Small wooden footbridges cross narrow channels, their planks darkened with age and moisture. Each bridge creaks under the slightest movement, a subtle warning of unstable boards and soft earth beneath. The air is thick with humidity and the scent of wet vegetation, carrying the quiet sounds of frogs, insects, and distant birds. Travelers along the road notice unusual activity. The bridges seem to creak with heavy footsteps, as though someone is walking across them. The rhythm is unmistakable, a weight and cadence consistent with human presence. Yet when observers step onto the bridges, no one is there. The boards shift only under their own weight, and the water remains still. The effect is consistent across time and weather. Sunlight or fog, wind or calm, does not alter the phenomenon. The footsteps appear without origin, echoing along the bridge as though someone invisible follows the path. Observers describe the creaks as deliberate in timing, never random, always suggesting movement in a single direction along the span of the bridge. The experience is amplified by isolation. The swamp around the road absorbs sound, leaving the bridges and footfalls as the dominant auditory feature. Even slight echoes seem magnified. Travelers report a heightened awareness of every motion. The subtle swaying of boards, the gentle ripple of water beneath, and the sensation that they are not alone. Local stories explain the phenomenon. Some say the bridges retain memory of past travelers, carrying the weight of footsteps that once crossed nightly. Others suggest spirits linger, bound to the wood and water, moving unseen but echoing the motion of life once present. The effect is said to remind travelers of caution and respect for the swampy terrain. Observers report physical sensations. Standing on the bridges, some feel a slight pressure in the chest or along the back, as though unseen presence is near. Others describe goosebumps or an instinctive tightening of posture. The sensations are brief and subtle, never threatening, yet impossible to ignore. Attempts to record the effect are inconsistent. Audio devices capture faint creaking but often fail to reproduce the full rhythm heard in person. Instruments measuring vibration detect minimal movement, insufficient to account for the sound of heavy footsteps. The phenomenon remains untraceable by conventional means. Time and perception are affected. Observers report minutes stretching and compressing while on the bridges. The creaks seem to move ahead of or behind expectation, creating a sense of anticipation or hesitation. Even after leaving, the memory of the footsteps persists, vivid and disorienting. Birds avoid perching on or near the bridges during active periods. Small mammals retreat from surrounding reeds. Fish in the water below swim away from areas directly under the footbridges. The natural behavior of wildlife suggests a subtle awareness of something unseen. The bridges themselves amplify the effect. Wooden planks shift slightly under minimal weight, creating an exaggerated sense of presence. The narrow structure focuses attention, forcing observers to notice movement and sound. Approaching the far end intensifies the creaks, as though the span responds to human movement, yet still reveals no origin. The experience is most pronounced at dawn and dusk. Low light conditions soften visual cues, allowing the auditory sensation to dominate perception. Mist rising from the water enhances the effect, stretching the sense of distance and masking ordinary shadows. No harm accompanies the phenomenon. The echoes of movement are unsettling but safe. There is no contact, no aggression, and no force beyond the perception of sound and subtle physical sensation. The effect is psychological and environmental, compelling attention while preserving safety. The road and bridges retain consistency. Repeated visits by observers produce similar experiences. Footsteps occur, boards creak, and the sensation of presence remains. Each bridge, though unique in structure, behaves similarly, suggesting that the effect is tied to the location and environment rather than individual observers. Travelers often leave with lasting impressions. Even after leaving Lantern Bridge Road, the memory of the creaking boards and heavy footsteps lingers. Some describe hearing the echoes in dreams, or sensing the presence on other walks through quiet landscapes. The effect endures beyond the immediate encounter. Lantern Bridge Road remains a place apart. Narrow footbridges cross swampy water, creaking with invisible footsteps. Mist rises from the surface, softening edges and hiding shapes. Observers feel the weight of unseen presence, the anticipation of motion, and the subtle pull of environment shaped by history. The experience continues night after night. Footsteps echo. Boards shift. The water remains still. No one appears. Travelers pass cautiously. Observing, listening, and feeling the presence that defines Lantern Bridge Road. A space where memory, perception, and landscape converge. And where bridges carry more than Wuda, they carry echoes of life that never left. Willowshade Lane winds through a dense grove of drooping willow trees, their long branches trailing close to the ground, brushing against the path like ghostly fingers. The air is thick and damp, carrying the scent of wet earth and leaves. Sunlight filters through the swaying branches in muted streaks, casting moving shadows along the narrow lane. The path appears ordinary at first glance, yet an unease lingers in the stillness, subtle and persistent. Visitors often notice the first whispers before they see anything unusual. The voices are soft, carried on the breeze or perhaps emerging from the rustle of leaves. The sound seems to come from every direction at once, wrapping around the lane, threading between the willow trunks, and fading into the distance only to reappear moments later. The whispers are insistent. They call for travelers to turn back, to reconsider each step. The repetition of names creates a sense of familiarity and intrusion at the same time. The voices are neither loud nor threatening, yet they create a profound attention in anyone who passes through the lane. There is a weight to the sound, an insistence that grows stronger the further one ventures. The willow trees seem to move with purpose. Branches sway even in the absence of wind. Leaves brush against clothing, brushing again and again, as if guiding travelers or warning them away. Shadows twist along the path in the muted light, creating shapes that seem alive, yet dissolve when looked at directly. The combination of movement and whispering produces a sensation of being observed, watched quietly from above and around. Those who linger feel the voices more clearly. Names are repeated, sometimes softly, sometimes with a slight urgency. The repetition seems to synchronize with footsteps, the rhythm of movement, and the sway of branches. Some report that the whispers echo personal memories, faintly altered, and resonate in a way that heightens awareness of the surrounding environment. The experience is both fascinating and unsettling. Travelers describe a compulsion to listen, to move carefully along the lane, to respect the rhythm of sound and shadow. Curiosity and caution intertwine, guiding behavior without conscious thought. Some feel drawn backward, toward the lane's entrance, while others feel compelled to proceed, testing the boundary between fear and fascination. Even in daylight, the lane feels removed from ordinary time. Minutes stretch, footsteps sound muted, and shadows shift with a subtle independence from wind or sun. Observers describe an intensified perception of rustling leaves, distant sounds, and the smallest changes in light. The lane exists as a space apart, a quiet corridor where the familiar rules of observation seem altered. Local stories suggest the lane has always demanded respect. It is said the trees remember travelers who pass beneath them, holding echoes of footsteps, whispers, and intent. Those who ignore the voices or move recklessly are rumored to feel a compulsion to return, to retrace steps, or to leave items behind as acknowledgement. Some accounts describe visitors who became lost temporarily, emerging later with a heightened awareness of sound and shadow. Night intensifies the effect. Moonlight casts the willow branches in stark relief, elongating shadows and highlighting subtle motion. The whispers become clearer, names repeated with subtle variations, almost as if responding to the observer. The fog that sometimes rises from the earth mingles with the branches, softening edges and creating an ethereal atmosphere. Observers report a sense of stillness in the surrounding forest, as though the lane itself has absorbed sound and movement, leaving only the whispers and the slow sway of trees. The path seems alive in the interaction between observer and environment. Movement is noticed by the trees and responded to by the shadows. Branches bend slightly toward approaching figures. The rhythm of whispers adjusts subtly. And the lane feels attentive. The effect is cumulative, growing stronger the longer one remains, creating both fascination and caution in those who traverse it. Attempts to document the phenomenon are limited in success. Photographs capture the lane, trees, and light, but not the movement or the whispers. Audio recording picks up ambient rustling, yet cannot reproduce the sense of presence or the repetition of names. The experience is tied to human perception, the subtle interplay of observation, expectation, and attention. Those who leave the lane carry the experience with them. Even after stepping into open areas, the sensation of being watched, the echo of names, and the memory of swaying branches persist. Travelers report heightened sensitivity to sound, shadows, and movement in other environments, a reminder of the lasting impression of Willowshade Lane. The lane endures as a place of quiet authority. Drooping willows bend over the path, whispers call, and shadows shift. Travelers are drawn, guided, and sometimes warned, yet nothing confronts them directly. The lane demands attention, patience, and respect, offering an experience that blends memory, perception, and environment. At Willowshade Lane, the line between sound and shadow, observer and observed, is indistinct. Whispers repeat names, shadows sway independently, and branches bend as if alive. Travelers who pass through leave marked by awareness, reminded that some paths are more than their appearance, carrying history, memory, and attention woven into the quiet movement of trees and the persistent voices that call them back. Silent marsh road winds along tidal flats, where mud and shallow water stretch toward the horizon. The path is narrow and uneven, bordered by low grasses and clusters of cypress trees whose roots twist into the saturated soil. By day, the road seems unremarkable, a passage through the marsh connecting small settlements. Yet at night, travelers report phenomena that transform the landscape into a place of quiet tension and subtle unease. They emerge as indistinct shapes, standing at the boundary between mud and shallow tide pools. The air grows heavier near the figures. A damp chill settles over the tires or feet of those passing, and each breath feels slightly labored. Fog often gathers along the tidal flats, thickening around the shapes and obscuring their lower halves. The combination of cold air and mist creates a sense of weight, as though the marsh itself presses quietly upon travelers. Over minutes, their outlines fade, merging with the surrounding mist until they are barely perceptible. By the time travelers reach the spots where the figures once stood, nothing remains but the glistening water and mud, disturbed only by occasional ripples that seem to have no source. Ripples move as though disturbed by invisible footsteps. Small waves travel across shallow pools, spreading in patterns that suggest movement, yet no one is present to create them. Pebbles shift, and soft splashes rise, adding to the perception of unseen activity. The marsh seems alive, responding to the observer as much as the figures themselves. The road narrows further along the flats. Here, the tidal waters encroach closer to the boards and worn earth, forcing travelers to remain alert. The combination of water, mud, and fog heightens awareness, and the silent figures appear more distinct against the reflective surfaces. Shadows stretch unnaturally along the water, emphasizing the presence of forms that vanish almost as soon as they are noticed. Animals avoid the area at night. Birds remain perched in distant trees, refusing to enter low branches. Small mammals retreat to dense undergrowth, and even insects are quieter than usual. The silence enhances the perception of movement and presence, leaving travelers feeling observed by a landscape that is both empty and alive. The phenomenon is consistent. Those who traverse Silent Marsh Road repeatedly describe the same pattern. Figures appear at the water's edge, they remain motionless, their gaze fixed, and then gradually sink into the fog. The process occurs in the same locations, suggesting a rhythm that is tied to the marsh itself rather than to human activity. Light interacts strangely with the mist. Headlights or lanterns illuminate the water and mud, reflecting off ripples and creating shifting reflections that make the figures appear more solid than they are. Shadows extend unnaturally across the flats, stretching toward travelers in ways that make the marsh feel alive. Time feels altered along the road. Observers report that minutes seem to stretch longer than usual. Stops to examine the water or the fading figures feel prolonged, creating a sensation of slowed perception. Even after leaving the marsh, the impression of presence lingers, as if the air itself retains memory of what occurred. The tidal flats are unpredictable. Water rises and falls with the tides, creating changing pathways and reflections. Shallow pools form and dissolve, influencing where the figures appear and where travelers must navigate. The marsh itself is constantly in flux, adding to the sense that the phenomena are part of the natural landscape yet exist beyond ordinary observation. The experience is immersive and silent. No sound accompanies the figures beyond the occasional ripple or soft splash. Their gaze is unbroken. The fog amplifies every detail, yet obscures everything else. Travelers feel a connection to the marsh that is both alluring and unsettling. Cameras may capture vague shapes or reflections in water, yet the clarity is never complete. The figure's presence seems tied to human perception, appearing with greater intensity when observers notice them and fading when approached too closely. The road and marsh retain memory. Silent Marsh Road exists as a corridor where past and present converge. The tidal flats, the fog, and the water's surface carry the impression of unseen watchers. Travelers experience the subtle choreography of forms, fog, and ripples, a reminder that some landscapes maintain life in ways that are imperceptible yet undeniable. By dawn, the marsh appears ordinary. Fog lifts, tidal waters retreat, and the flats glisten in daylight. The figures have vanished entirely. Only mud, water, and reflections remain. Yet the memory of watching shapes sink into mist and the soft ripples in the water remain vivid. In those who traverse the road at night, Silent Marsh Road endures as a place of quiet mystery. Figures appear, stare silently, and sink into fog. Waters ripple with unseen motion, and shadows stretch unnaturally across the flats. The road continues to guide travelers through an environment where perception and landscape intersect, creating experiences that linger long after the night ends, connecting those who walk it to something larger, hidden, and quietly observing. Mossvale Crossing winds through a low-lying forest where the ground is soft and perpetually damp. Moss clings to tree trunks and rocks, and the air is thick with moisture. The road itself is narrow, bordered by shallow pools and overgrown vegetation. Even on the sunniest days, the path feels cool, shadowed, and heavy with lingering mist. Every step presses into wet earth, and water collects in hollows, reflecting the dense canopy above. Visitors report unusual sensations almost immediately. A faint brushing across the shoulders, light and fleeting, as though someone passes just behind. Turning reveals nothing, only the shadowed trees and the path stretching onward. The feeling is subtle yet persistent, enough to make the skin tingle and the heart quicken. Breathing follows the footsteps. Audible only in the quietest moments, shallow breaths seem to come from just behind the traveler. They do not match any rhythm of the observer's own breathing. Moving forward intensifies the perception, while stopping amplifies it further. Observers report a growing awareness of presence, though no figure is visible. The dampness seems tied to the sensation. Air clings to the skin, the mist thickens, and clothing becomes slightly heavier. Moisture on the road and vegetation amplifies sound, capturing every footstep and distant rustle. The environment heightens perception, making the invisible hands and subtle breathing feel tangible. Time feels altered along the road. Minutes stretch as the mind focuses on unseen presence. Shadows shift unnaturally, and the ambient sounds of forest and water seem amplified. Observers describe a sensation of moving through a space slightly apart from ordinary time, where every step carries anticipation. Animals react to the path. Birds fly from nearby trees, small mammals remain hidden, and insects fall silent. And insects fall silent when the presence is strongest. Even fish in pools beneath the crossing avoid the edges, leaving the water eerily still. Nature itself seems aware of something unseen, responding to it in subtle ways. Fog and low light enhance the effect. Morning mist or dusk creates conditions where perception sharpens. Light diffuses through moisture, softening outlines and masking depth. Shadows blend with surrounding foliage, amplifying the sensation of movement just beyond sight. Observers feel as though the road itself guides attention, drawing awareness to unseen activity. Attempts to capture the phenomenon fail. Cameras and audio devices sometimes record minor movement or ambient sound, but never fully reproduce the experience. The brushing on the shoulder cannot be measured, and the breathing does not appear on recordings. Instruments detecting vibration register minimal interference, yet it cannot account for the perception of presence. The effect is consistent among visitors. Travelers report similar experiences regardless of time or season. The invisible hands, the subtle breath, the sensation of being followed occur along the damp road, creating a recognizable pattern of presence. Local lore explains the crossing. Some believe the road holds memory, replaying gestures of those who walked it long ago. Others suggest protective spirits, bound to the forest, maintaining vigilance over travelers. The effect is subtle, a reminder of history, caution, and respect for the path. Standing still amplifies the experience. Observers who pause feel the presence more clearly. The brushing intensifies slightly, breaths grow distinct, and the mind perceives movement from multiple directions. Moving forward disperses the intensity, though awareness of unseen proximity remains. No harm accompanies the sensations. The experiences are unsettling but safe. The presence is tactile and psychological rather than physical or threatening. Visitors leave altered, carrying memory of the damp road, the brushes on their shoulders, and the steady, quiet breathing that follows. The environment reinforces the perception. Moss, mist, and moisture heighten every sound, every shadow, and every subtle shift in the air. The forest and the road together create conditions that make the invisible presence undeniable. Even after leaving, the road lingers in memory. Observers recall each step, each brush, each breath. Dreams sometimes echo the sensation of following or being followed along the mossy path. Awareness of unseen presence can resurface unexpectedly, long after leaving the crossing. Mossvale Crossing endures as a space apart. The road remains narrow, damp, and shadowed. Trees bend and twist, reflecting years of wind and water. Footsteps echo, brushing is felt, and breathing follows. Travelers move carefully, observing, listening, and feeling the weight of unseen presence that defines the crossing. At night and in mist, the effect is strongest. The air is heavy, the fog thick, and awareness sharp. The road feels alive with memory, history, and presence. Each step carries the subtle insistence of something unseen, brushing shoulders, whispering near, a reminder that some paths are never truly empty. Mossvale Crossing continues to shape perception. It is a road where sight is unreliable, touch is heightened, and sound carries secrets. The invisible hands and breath follow those who travel it, guiding attention, demanding respect, and leaving memory imprinted long after the path has been left behind. Stillwater Path winds through a dense swamp, narrow and lined with gnarled trees whose roots twist into shallow pools. The ground is soft and damp, covered with fallen leaves, reeds, and patches of moss that obscure the water beneath. Even in daylight, the air is heavy with moisture, carrying the earthy scent of wet soil and decaying plant matter. Pools of stagnant water reflect the gray sky above, creating a mirror-like surface that hints at movement beneath. Mist rises unexpectedly from the pools. It begins as a thin wisp, curling upward, barely noticeable at first. Then it thickens, spreading across the path and clinging to the surrounding vegetation. The mist obscures vision, softening edges and altering perspective. Shadows appear across the road. They stretch and shift unnaturally, elongated beyond the form of any passerby. The combination of mist and shadow alters perception. Observers often feel their senses heighten, noting the smallest shifts in the air. The faintest ripple of water, or the subtle sway of a branch. The smallest shifts in the air, the faintest ripple of water, or the subtle sway of a branch. The rustle of leaves takes on an unusual quality. The environment feels alive, attentive, and aware of those who traverse the path. As light fades, shadows become longer and more pronounced. Mist thickens into rolling sheets. And shapes that were barely visible in daylight emerge with eerie clarity. The path itself seems narrower, confined by fog and shadow. Observers describe a sensation of being watched, a quiet awareness that follows each movement along the trail. Sounds behave unusually along Stillwater Path. Footsteps are muffled yet echo faintly through the mist. Distant bird calls seem slowed, altered. Water ripples in the pools in time with the shadows. As if the environment itself is responsive. Each rustle, each shift of mist or reflection on the water draws attention. Making the observer acutely conscious of presence and movement. Those who linger feel a compelling pull. The longer an observer remains, the stronger the sensation of being drawn forward along the path. It is subtle at first, a gentle nudge in the legs, a quiet tug in perception. Then it becomes irresistible, urging the traveler to continue despite fatigue or uncertainty. Some report difficulty turning back once this sensation sets in, as if the environment itself influences their movement. The shadows are relentless yet non-threatening. They stretch along the path, glide around obstacles, and disappear only when the mist recedes or the observer leaves the area. Local accounts suggest the phenomenon has been observed for generations. Residents describe Stillwater Path as a place that tests awareness and caution. Stories tell of travelers who became lost or disoriented, guided only by subtle cues in shadow and mist. Some speak of the shadows as guardians or watchers, present to monitor movement and ensure respect for the swamp. Others describe them as echoes of the past, lingering impressions of those who once traveled the path. Night intensifies the experience. Moonlight filtering through mist creates moving patterns across the pools and trees. Shadows stretch longer and appear more deliberate. Mist curls and coils with increased density, making the path almost indistinguishable from the surrounding swamp. Observers report a deepened focus, an acute sensitivity to movement, and an amplified perception of the environment. Attempts to document the phenomenon are limited in success. Cameras often capture only mist and vague shapes, missing the precise motion and unnatural proportions of the shadows. Audio recordings pick up rustling and water movement, yet fail to convey the sense of presence and observation described by visitors. The experience is perceptual as much as visual, dependent on the attention and awareness of those who traverse the path. Those who leave Stillwater Path carry the memory of observation. Even after stepping onto solid ground, the sense of movement, stretching shadows, and curling mist lingers. Observers describe heightened sensitivity to light, shadow, and sound in other settings, an echo of the experience along the swamp road. The path leaves an impression, a reminder of the subtle power of environment over perception. Stillwater Path endures as a place of quiet authority. Mist rises, shadows stretch, and pools ripple in response to unseen forces. Travelers are compelled to move carefully, to observe and respect, and to acknowledge the presence of the environment in ways both subtle and profound. The road is unchanged, yet every traversal offers a renewed awareness of perception, reality, and the mysterious interplay of mist and shadow. At Stillwater Path, the swamp is alive in silence. Mist curls from the water, shadows glide across the planks. And the road guides without direction. Observers are drawn, compelled, and subtly influenced. Experiencing a place where perception and environment converge. Each journey along the path becomes a study in observation, attentiveness, and respect. Leaving visitors with the memory of movement that is never fully explained. Stretching across the fog and the still water of the swamp. Stillwater Path winds through a dense swamp, narrow and bordered by cypress trees whose roots twist into murky pools. The ground is soft with mud, and the road itself is cracked in places, giving way to shallow water and reeds. Mist rises from the swamp pools unexpectedly, drifting across the path in soft, shifting blankets that obscure the edges of vision. The mist behaves unpredictably. It forms without wind or disturbance, curling upward from the water in thin, ethereal streams. Sometimes it lingers, softening the shapes of trees and reeds. Other times it sweeps across the path, momentarily thick enough to hide a few steps ahead. The fog creates an impression of separation, as if the road is no longer connected to the surrounding forest. Shadows move unnaturally across the road. They stretch, twist, and bend in ways that defy normal light. A tree's shadow may elongate toward the center of the path, then recoil. Shapes appear vaguely human or animal, only to dissipate before closer inspection. The effect is disorienting, suggesting motion where there is none, and exaggerating perception of depth and distance. The swamp amplifies sound. Water laps quietly at roots and embankments. Frogs and insects contribute intermittent croaks and buzzes, yet the mist absorbs most other noise. Footsteps echo differently, and faint splashes from unseen sources mingle with natural sounds. Each movement seems exaggerated, drawing attention to the observer's presence within the space. Visitors often feel observed. The combination of mist and shadow creates a heightened awareness. Peripheral vision captures subtle shifts, yet direct glances reveal nothing. The sensation is persistent, as if the environment itself watches, adjusting to presence. Stopping does not end the phenomena. Standing still, mist continues to rise from the swamp pools. Shadows stretch and retract. The road feels alive with subtle motion, independent of wind or physical influence. Remaining in place increases the intensity of perception, a quiet pressure that heightens attention and curiosity. The path appears longer than it is. Curves obscure distance, and mist softens familiar landmarks. Shadows at the edges of the road create visual cues that confuse depth perception. Walkers often feel the path stretching further than expected, the swamp expanding subtly to contain the observer. The mist interacts with light in unusual ways. Moonlight or lanterns filter through the fog, creating shifting glows and silhouettes. Pools reflect faint illumination, sometimes highlighting the base of a shadow or the edge of a tree, amplifying the sense of motion. Reflections appear distorted, reinforcing the impression that shapes move independently. Shadows respond inconsistently. Even when no light source changes, they appear to shift. Branches cast forms that stretch toward the road, then curl back. Mud and water reflect parts of these movements, making it difficult to distinguish between reality and perception. The environment is isolated. Sound from distant roads or forest is minimal. Birds rarely enter the misty swamp, and insects move quietly. The path exists in relative silence, save for the occasional natural sound and the subtle interactions of light, shadow, and mist. A chill often accompanies the rising mist. Skin feels prickled, breath becomes more conscious, and a sense of anticipation grows. The swamp seems to respond to presence, heightening awareness of each step and movement. Attempts to document the phenomena are limited. Cameras and audio recorders capture the swamp in stillness. Shadows appear normal, and mist is present but static. The stretching of shapes and the perception of movement is largely lost, emphasizing that the effect is experiential and perceptual rather than purely visual. The path maintains consistency over time. Visitors returning days or weeks later describe similar experiences. Mist rises from the same pools, shadows stretch along the same portions of the road, and the swamp continues to interact subtly with observers. The phenomena persist independent of individual presence yet appear intensified when attention is directed along the path. Even in daylight, the effects persist. The mist is thinner and shadows less dramatic, but subtle motion remains. Observers note elongated shapes and slight shifts in reflection, providing continuity of experience across time of day. Departure gradually restores normal perception. Walking away from the swamp, mist dissipates, shadows return to normal proportions, and the road appears ordinary. The pools reflect light calmly, and the trees settle into familiar forms. The perception of motion fades, leaving memory and awareness intact. Looking back, the path appears unchanged. The cypress trees, water, and road remain as before. Mist drifts lightly, and shadows lie quietly along the surface. Yet those who walked the path recall movement, stretching, and ethereal shapes that seem to exist independently of natural laws. Stillwater path endures. The swamp, road, and mist remain in quiet, subtle motion. Shadows stretch unnaturally. Visitors feel observed, aware, and disoriented. The path is a place where perception and environment converge. A space where light, fog, and shadow interact to create an immersive experience that lingers long after leaving. A haunting testament to the quiet power of nature and atmosphere. The road to Crooked Hollow winds sharply through dense forest, the path narrow and lined with towering trees whose branches arch overhead, creating a tunnel of shadows. Moss drapes along the trunks and fallen leaves cover the ground, muffling footsteps and softening the sounds of vehicles passing through. During the day, the road seems ordinary, a quiet passage connecting old homesteads and farmland. Yet travelers at night report encounters that are anything but ordinary. Figures in old clothing appear. They emerge suddenly along the edge of the road, standing still as if waiting. Observers describe them in attire from decades past, garments faded and weathered. Men in worn coats, women in long skirts, their forms unmistakably human yet slightly unreal. Their presence is silent, imposing, yet calm, a reminder that the forest remembers. Even as vehicles approach, the shapes remain rooted to the spot. Drivers and pedestrians notice the figurisa gaze, fixed and unyielding. The air feels heavier around them. Shadows seem to deepen, stretching unnaturally along the road. They vanish when approached. The moment an observer attempts to get closer, the figures dissolve into the darkness or fog. No trace remains on the ground, no disturbance of leaves or earth. One instant they stand clearly, the next they are gone, leaving only the forest and the winding road. Leaving only the forest and the winding road. The effect is sudden, disorienting, and consistent across multiple reports. Fog often accompanies the sightings. Mist rises from the forest floor, curling along the trunks and weaving between the figures. The forest reacts subtly. Branches sway without wind. Leaves shift quietly along the road. Even the sounds of wildlife are diminished. Birds and small mammals retreat, leaving a stillness that accentuates the presence of figures. And the feeling that the forest itself watches silently. The bends in the road enhance perception. The figures are often glimpsed briefly before vanishing from sight. The sudden appearance and disappearance creates a sense of disorientation. Travelers report that shadows stretch across bends and trees seem to lean toward the road, guiding the eye to points where the figures emerge. The phenomenon is consistent over time. Observers from different generations report the same experiences. Figures in old clothing, standing silently, vanishing when approached. The forest and road remain unchanged by daylight. Yet at night, the events repeat as though the land itself preserves memory. Time feels altered along the road. Minutes stretch as travelers focus on the figures and their surroundings. Sounds are amplified, the crunch of tires over leaves, the swish of wind through branches. Breathing becomes more conscious. The presence of figures and the forest's quiet rhythm creates an altered perception of space and time. The figures do not interact. They make no gestures or sounds. They neither follow nor flee. Observers can watch from a distance. But any attempt to approach dissolves the apparition. Their purpose remains unknown. Yet the impression of awareness is undeniable. The road retains its history. Crooked Hollow was once an active route for local communities. The forest has reclaimed much of it, but the path remains a corridor between past and present. Travelers sense that the figures embody memory, moments frozen in the forest, reflections of those who walked the road decades ago. Animals avoid the path at night. Owls remain perched silently in distant branches. Deer and other wildlife keep to the undergrowth. Insects are noticeably quiet. The stillness amplifies the presence of the figures, creating an atmosphere that feels both alive and still simultaneously. Headlights and lanterns illuminate figures in fog, casting long shadows that shift with curvature of the road. Reflections in wet leaves and puddles enhance the sense of movement, while the figures themselves remain rooted in place until approached. Travelers leave with lingering impressions. The memory of old clothing, still figures, and sudden disappearance stays long after the journey ends. The road appears ordinary in daylight, yet the recollection of night reinforces its mysterious character. Observers carry a sense of having witnessed a threshold between past and present, where time and perception converge. Crooked Hollow endures as a place of quiet mystery. The road bends sharply, figures emerge silently, and the forest remains watchful. Shadows stretch along the boards and leaves. The experience repeats across generations, preserving a subtle rhythm that invites observation, caution, and reflection. Those who traverse it at night know its presence. They feel the forest's weight, see figures in old clothing, and experience the fleeting nature of what vanishes when approached. Crooked Hollow is a path where memory lingers, the past walks quietly alongside the present, and the road itself becomes an observer of all who pass through. Fog-bound Avenue winds through a low coastal plain, crossing small tidal creeks and marshes where the water shifts with each rise and fall of the tide. The banks are lined with reeds and gnarled trees, their roots exposed and slick with moisture. Mist frequently rises from the shallow water, curling around the narrow road and softening edges. Even on calm nights, visibility is limited, and the landscape appears fluid and uncertain, as though the land itself is breathing. Boaters passing nearby report unusual phenomena. Lanterns appear along the road, hovering in the fog where no docks exist. The lights appear to guide movement. Observers note that the lanterns align in a pattern that seems to follow the curves of the road and water channels. As boats approach, the lights appear to beckon, drawing them closer. The effect is subtle, a gentle suggestion of direction, but often enough to lure vessels into shallow water or marshy banks. Experienced navigators find the alignment uncanny, precise enough to mimic a constructed pathway. The phenomenon is enhanced by fog and low light. Thick mist distorts distances, softens shapes, and masks depth. The lanterns glow more clearly against the gray haze, appearing suspended above water and marsh. Shadows merge with the fog, and familiar landmarks seem to shift, making perception unreliable. Observers report that the lights appear to move slightly with perspective, always maintaining a leading position as boats advance. Those who approach the lanterns by land or attempt to reach their sources find nothing. No posts, no footbridges, no evidence of human placement. The fog and marsh remain undisturbed, yet the glow persists in the same location. The lights vanish if someone attempts to touch or physically approach them. The effect is persistent at night. Twilight and darkness bring the clearest sightings. During daylight, the lights are seldom visible, their glow overwhelmed by sun and mist. Boaters navigating after sunset report the strongest experiences, with lanterns appearing repeatedly along the same stretch of road and tidal creeks. Observers describe sensations of being guided. The lights create a subtle pull, an instinctive attention toward the path they delineate. Some describe a feeling of weightless movement, as if the water itself encourages motion along the illuminated route. Even when aware of shallow areas or obstacles, the lanterns maintain influence, holding focus and subtly directing approach. Holding focus and subtly directing approach. The phenomenon appears independent of tides or weather. Fog and mist enhance visibility, but the lanterns appear regardless of wind, tide height, or water movement. Calm nights, drizzly evenings, and even light rain produce similar sightings. The consistency suggests the lights are tied to the location and environment rather than temporary conditions. Local lore provides explanation. Stories speak of travelers and boaters lost along the tidal creeks, drawn to water by unseen guides. Some claim the lanterns are remnants of old warning systems, spirits attempting to continue their duty, or echoes of events long past. Regardless of interpretation, the lights serve as markers of caution and attention. Observers report psychological effects. Boaters often experience heightened awareness of water depth, obstacles, and environmental cues. Mistakes feel amplified, attention sharpens, and perception of distance and direction is altered. The lights focus the mind on navigation and presence, demanding careful observation and engagement. Wildlife reacts subtly. Birds hesitate to fly near the lights. Fish in shallow channels move away. Small mammals and marsh creatures retreat from the banks. The effect on the environment reinforces the perception of something unusual and focused, as though the lanterns influence more than human attention. Time perception is altered. Travelers note that minutes stretch and compress while following the lights. The fog, tidal shifts, and gentle glow create a liminal space where the road and water seem to merge. The lights maintain attention, guiding motion and perception without revealing origin. No harm accompanies the phenomenon. The lanterns do not physically interact with boats or travelers. No force is applied, and no danger occurs beyond the natural risk of shallow water. The experience is subtle, psychological, and environmental, creating wonder, caution, and respect. Fog-bound avenue endures as a liminal space. The road and creeks remain narrow and marshy. Lanterns appear along the path, guiding, beckoning, and vanishing when approached. Observers navigate with heightened awareness, noting the interplay of fog, water, and light. Night after night, the phenomenon repeats. Lanterns glow. Boats follow. The water ripples softly beneath. Shallow banks await. Observers approach but cannot touch the lights. The road, tidal creeks, and mist maintain their role as stage and guide, preserving a delicate intersection of perception, environment, and memory. Fog-bound avenue continues to challenge and intrigue. It is a place where attention, caution, and curiosity converge. Lanterns appear without origin, guiding those who travel into awareness of the water and marsh. The phenomenon is subtle, consistent, and enduring, reminding all who pass that some roads hold secrets beyond sight, waiting to be experienced at the edge of light and fog. Sable Pine Road stretches through dense forest, its surface uneven and littered with fallen needles. Fallen trees block the path at irregular intervals, their trunks cracked and weathered, moss creeping along the bark. Branches above sway and creak with subtle motion, even when wind is absent. The air carries the scent of damp earth and pine, mingled with the faint decay of leaves and underbrush. Light filters unevenly through the dense canopy, casting long, shifting shadows across the road. Travelers immediately notice the stillness of the forest. Birdsong is scarce, insects move silently, and the usual hum of wildlife is subdued. Faint figures are glimpsed behind the pines. Observers report seeing shapes just beyond the trunks, glimpsed out of the corner of the eye. They are indistinct, blurred by distance and shadow, yet their posture appears human. The figures rarely move in ways that are recognizable, seeming to shift and fade as the observer attempts to focus directly on them. They appear intermittently, as if aware of observation, but never approach or interact. Branches above seem to respond to presence. They creak and bend subtly, as though following movement along the path. Even when no wind disturbs the forest, observers note that the branches sway in rhythm with footsteps or shifts in attention. The fallen trees create natural obstacles. Each trunk requires careful navigation, forcing travelers to pause, climb, or step over. Fog occasionally drifts through the forest. The obstacles slow movement, allowing more time to notice the faint figures and to sense the motion in the forest above. Some report that the more time spent among the fallen trees, the more clearly the shadows and shapes emerge, yet clarity remains elusive. It clings to the trunks and stretches along the road, softening edges and blending shapes into gray indistinctness. In the fog, the figures appear closer, more defined, yet remain intangible. The effect grows stronger near dusk. Light fades, shadows lengthen, and the forest becomes a lattice of dark forms against the dim sky. The creaking of branches intensifies slightly, as though amplified by the quiet, creating a rhythm that guides attention without revealing the source. Travelers often feel a mixture of caution and fascination. The presence of fallen trees, swaying branches, and faint figures encourages careful movement and heightened awareness. Curiosity draws them forward, yet instinct warns of danger or disorientation. Each step is deliberate, each glance upward or toward the pines measured. The forest seems to reward patience and observation while discouraging haste. Night amplifies the foresta-s effect. Moonlight filtering through the canopy casts uneven illumination across the road. Figures are more vivid in the contrast of light and shadow, yet remain intangible. The creaking of branches above becomes more pronounced in the still night air, echoing through the dense trees. Observers report that the forest seems to breathe, expanding and contracting with each movement along the path. Attempts to record the experience yield limited success. Cameras capture the trees, the path, and occasional shadows, but not the precise movement or the subtleties of figures glimpsed from the corner of the eye. Audio recordings register creaks and rustles, yet fail to reproduce the sensation of presence or awareness described by those who traverse the road. The phenomenon is perceptual, dependent on attention, context, and the observer's awareness of subtle cues. Local accounts describe the road as a test of observation and respect. The fallen trees and dense forest demand careful navigation. Figures appear as a reward for attentiveness or as a reminder of the forest's history. Some say the shapes are echoes of past travelers, others suggest guardians of the road, present to ensure that those who move through the lane remain mindful of their surroundings. Visitors often leave with a lingering impression. Even after returning to open areas, the memory of the swaying branches, creaking trunks, and faint figures remains vivid. Observers describe heightened awareness of shadow and movement in other settings. Subtle echoes of attention and observation carried from Sable Pine Road. The path endures as a place of quiet authority. Fallen trees block the way, branches creak overhead, and figures remain just beyond perception. The line between forest and observer is blurred. Travelers are compelled to move carefully, to observe, and to respect the subtle rhythm of the forest. To observe, and to respect the subtle rhythm of the forest. The lane maintains its presence, blending history, perception, and environment into a space where observation is rewarded. Where observation is rewarded, yet the source of movement remains elusive. At Sable Pine Road, the line between forest and observer is blurred. Figures shift and vanish, shadows stretch unnaturally, and branches respond to subtle motion. Those who pass through are drawn into the awareness of the place, leaving marked by perception and memory. The road endures, unchanged yet alive, a corridor where the forest itself seems attentive, observing all who traverse its path. Darkwater Lane is narrow, flanked by dense trees whose branches arch overhead to form a near-continuous canopy. The road itself is uneven, composed of cracked asphalt and mud, with scattered leaves and debris from storms past. The air is heavy and still, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and decaying foliage. Even on clear nights, it can thicken without warning, drifting along the lane and obscuring vision entirely. Shapes disappear within its folds, and the familiar edges of the path vanish. Walking becomes uncertain, each step demanding attention. The mist seems alive, curling and twisting as though it anticipates movement along the lane. Whispers emerge from the trees. Soft at first, they grow audible with proximity. Names are called, sometimes clearly, sometimes elongated and distorted. Warnings follow, urging travelers to leave the lane, to turn back, to avoid the unknown ahead. The fog amplifies every sound. Footsteps echo unnaturally along the narrow path. Leaves rustle more sharply than expected. Each snap of a twig or movement in the canopy seems magnified. The whispers persist, threading through the ambient noise, making the lane feel alive and attentive. The lane itself feels disorienting. Turns appear sharper, distances longer. Shadows shift within the fog, stretching across the road and fading as quickly as they arrive. Trees that seemed distant moments before now loom close, altering perception of space. The narrowness of the path intensifies the sense of enclosure and confinement. Stopping does not silence the whispers. Even when standing still, the voices continue. Names are repeated, warnings restated, begging echoes that seem to originate from every direction. The sound is present but untethered, emanating from the fog, the trees, and the lane itself. The fog interacts with light in unusual ways. Headlights, lanterns, or moonlight diffuse softly through the mist, casting uncertain shadows that appear to move independently. Reflections on wet leaves or puddles shimmer faintly, suggesting shapes where none exist. The combination of low visibility, shifting shadows, and auditory phenomena heightens the sense of unreality. Travelers report a cold presence. Along with whispers, a chill often passes over the body, subtle but persistent. Skin pricks, breath becomes conscious, and awareness sharpens. The cold feels directed, brushing along the arms or legs, as if something unseen is moving close by. The lane isolates those who enter. Distant sounds fade. Birds and insects are absent. The environment seems suspended, enclosed within fog, trees, and road. Normal cues of direction and distance become unreliable, reinforcing a sense of vulnerability and heightened perception. Shadowed shapes flicker at the edges of vision. Forms seem human or vaguely humanoid, appearing momentarily among the trees or fog, then vanishing. Turning to look directly reveals nothing, yet the perception of movement persists. These shadows complement the auditory experience, creating a multisensory effect that feels deliberate and alive. Attempts to record or capture the phenomena fail. Audio devices may pick up faint noise, wind, or distant rustling, but the voices and whispers are largely absent. Photographs show only fog, trees, and road. The lane's presence, its sounds and perception of attention, exist primarily in direct experience. Minutes stretch and compress unpredictably. The repetition of whispers and movement creates a sense of rhythm, yet it does not align with normal measurement of time. Observers often lose track of distance, progress, and duration, reinforcing the linear-s disorienting effect. The phenomenon persists in all weather. Rain, wind, or humidity alters the density of fog and the movement of shadows, but the whispers continue. Names, warnings, and pleas for departure remain constant, experienced with equal intensity regardless of conditions. Departure restores ordinary perception gradually. Walking away, the fog thins. Shadows shrink and normalize. Whispering fades into silence. The trees resume ordinary motion in wind. Awareness returns to normal, though memory retains the intensity of the experience. Looking back, the lane appears unchanged. Branches, fog, and uneven asphalt remain. No source for the whispers or shadows is visible. The path looks ordinary, but those who have walked it carry the impression of having been observed, guided, and warned along a route that exists in layers beyond ordinary reality. Darkwater Lane endures. The narrow road, the arching trees, and the shifting fog persist. Whispers echo from unseen corners, names are called, warnings are given, and shadowed forms glide just beyond sight. Travelers who enter feel heightened awareness, uncertainty, and presence. The lane remains a space where perception, atmosphere, and history converge, creating an immersive and unforgettable experience. Twin Cypress Road winds through a dense forest, where two enormous trees rise from opposite sides of the path and arch overhead. Their massive trunks are twisted with age, bark gnarled and textured, and their branches entwine, forming a natural cathedral above the planks below. Sunlight filters through the canopy in daytime, creating shifting patterns on the worn boards. But it is at night that the road takes on an entirely different character. Shadows stretch across the planks. As darkness falls, elongated shadows fan outward from the trunks of the twin cypress. They stretch across the path, shifting slowly with the movement of moonlight and fog. The shadows appear almost alive, bending and stretching in ways that seem independent of the trees themselves, reaching toward travelers as they pass. Figures kneel on the road at night. Observers report seeing forms kneeling among the shadows, low to the planks, motionless and still. Their presence is silent, yet undeniably human in shape. They do not speak or move, but their posture conveys a sense of reverence or vigilance, as though they are performing an act of quiet observation that persists unseen by the world beyond the forest. The figures remain fixed, unaffected by wind or the passing of vehicles. Those who approach slowly feel an increased awareness of the environment. The night air becomes colder, the stillness heavier, and the faint sounds of leaves rustling or water dripping are amplified against the quiet. The trees themselves seem to respond. The twin cypress sway gently even when there is no breeze, their branches creaking softly. The shadows lengthen in correspondence with the figures, stretching and blending into the forest floor. Moonlight and mist interact with the trunks and planks, creating illusions of movement where nothing is truly in motion. Fog enhances the atmosphere. When mist drifts along the road, the shadows appear darker, the kneeling figures more distinct. Visibility decreases, and the path feels narrower, enclosed by the twisting trees and heavy air. Every step along the planks is accompanied by an acute awareness of presence, as if the forest itself observes silently. The phenomenon is consistent. Observers across multiple nights describe the same sequence. Shadows stretch from the cypress, figures kneel without movement. And the road feels alive yet undisturbed. The repetition suggests a pattern bound to the location, tied to the age and positioning of the trees and the energy of the forest itself. The experience alters perception. Time seems slower along Twin Cypress Road. Steps sound amplified on the wooden planks. And every shift in the mist or shadow draws attention. Travelers describe a heightened awareness of the road beneath them, the air around them, and the silhouettes that remain fixed in stillness. Birds remain in distant branches, and smaller mammals retreat to thick underbrush. Even insects are fewer than expected, leaving a silence that enhances the presence of shadows and figures. The quiet amplifies the perception of stillness, making the kneeling shape seem both immediate and timeless. Headlights, lanterns, or moonlight cast long, twisting shadows that seem to stretch farther than the actual figures. The reflection of mist or damp wood creates depth, giving the impression that the kneeling forms exist on multiple planes at once. Observers report that the effect intensifies when the fog is thickest. The road is safe but demands respect. The planks are worn and uneven, moss clings to their edges, and roots occasionally rise across the path. The figures and shadows are not threatening, yet the combination of low light, kneeling forms, and shifting mist requires careful navigation. Travelers are advised to move slowly, observe closely, and remain aware of the forest around them. Despite their stillness, the kneeling forms disappear almost instantly if someone attempts to get too close. The shadows remain longer, stretching across planks and roots, but the human shapes dissolve into the night, leaving no trace of their presence. The road connects past and present. Twin Cypress Road was once a vital route for local communities. And the twin trees have stood for centuries. The shadows and figures are as if the memory of those who traveled or worked the road persists in silent observation, echoing the passage of time without intervention. Observers leave with lingering impressions. The stretch of road, the towering cypress, the kneeling figures, and the shifting shadows remain vivid in memory. Even during the day, travelers recall the sensations of stillness, cold air, and the subtle rhythm of shadows across planks. Twin Cypress Road endures as a place of quiet mystery. Figures kneel, shadows stretch, and the forest watches silently. The planks beneath the trees carry memory and presence, guiding the perception of those who pass after dark. It is a corridor where history, observation, and natural beauty converge, offering an experience that is immersive, contemplative, and hauntingly serene. Those who walk it at night understand its rhythm. They feel the weight of stillness, see the kneeling forms, and witness shadows extending across the planks. See the kneeling forms, and witness shadows extending across the planks. And witness shadows extending across the planks. Leaving travelers with the knowledge that some places hold quiet life that is both timeless and deeply felt. That some places hold quiet life that is both timeless and deeply felt. Shimmering hollow stretches through a low-lying forest where the road is often slick with moisture. Small puddles form along the path, reflecting the muted light of the sky above. The surrounding trees bend slightly, their branches heavy with fog and dew. Even on still days, the air feels thick, heavy with mist that obscures distance and softens the edges of the world. Travelers notice the reflections immediately. Puddles shimmer differently than ordinary water. Shapes appear within them, dark figures standing just beyond the observer's step. At first glance, the reflection seems like an illusion of light, a trick of fog and water. Yet upon closer inspection, the shapes take on the distinct form of human figures. The figures vanish when looked at directly. Shifting gaze from the reflection to the road itself reveals nothing. The puddles remain, glinting with light. Yet the figures disappear completely. Observers describe a lingering impression of form, posture, and presence, though the source is invisible. The experience is both unsettling and compelling, drawing the eye back to the water. Fog enhances the phenomenon. Dense mist softens visual boundaries, blending shadows with reflected light. The figures in puddles appear sharper against the diffused gray background. Yet direct observation erases them entirely. The interplay of fog, light, and reflection creates a sense that the hollow itself is aware, shaping perception for those who travel the road. Footsteps and sound accompany observation. The sounds are subtle, never threatening, but contribute to a sense of presence. Time and perception are affected. Shadows and reflections shift unnaturally, and peripheral vision hints at movement beyond immediate focus. The lead investigator's eyes widen in terror as they realize the true nature of the reflected world. Local stories provide context. Some say Shimmering Hollow preserves memory, replaying the passage of travelers who once walked the road long ago. Others believe spirits linger, bound to water and fog, appearing only in reflection. All accounts agree that the phenomenon is tied to mist and moisture, and that direct attention dissolves the apparition. The effect is consistent. Travelers report similar experiences across seasons and weather conditions, provided fog or mist is present. Reflections reveal figures at puddles scattered along the road. No observer has seen the shapes outside of reflection. The repetition creates a recognizable pattern, lending credibility to the reports. Animals respond subtly to the environment. Birds avoid low branches near puddles. Small mammals retreat into the brush. The behavior of wildlife suggests that the hollow reacts to more than human perception, adding a layer of unease and awareness to the path. Observers experience physical sensations. Some describe a chill along the spine or a pressure in the chest when viewing the reflection. Even without threat, the body reacts to unseen presence, reinforcing the impression of life or attention within the puddles. The sensation is fleeting but memorable, lingering after leaving the road. Attempts to capture the phenomenon are inconsistent. Photographs and video sometimes record unusual light patterns in puddles, but rarely replicate the clarity or distinctness of figures as perceived by the human eye. The shapes remain ephemeral, tied to perception rather than mechanical recording. The phenomenon is strongest at low light. Dusk and dawn, when fog is thickest, provide optimal conditions. Reflections sharpen, the air thickens, and the road seems longer. Shapes linger longer in puddles, holding attention, yet always vanish upon direct observation. Observers are never touched, threatened, or forced. The phenomenon is entirely visual and psychological, creating curiosity, tension, and a heightened awareness of surroundings. The hollow remains safe, though perceptually active, preserving a liminal space between reflection and reality. Shimmering Hollow endures as a liminal space. The road remains damp, puddles reflecting muted sky. Figures appear and vanish, drawing attention and shaping perception. Travelers move carefully, observing the interplay of light, water, and fog, aware that what is seen is not fully present, yet undeniably perceptible. The effect continues night after night. Puddles glimmer in mist, shapes appear in reflection, footsteps echo faintly, and the hollow holds attention. The road, water, and fog create an environment where memory, perception, and presence converge, a place apart from ordinary experience, waiting for those willing to see beyond the surface of the water. Observation is limited to the surface of the water, unable to touch or approach the figures. The environment waits for those willing to see beyond the surface of the water. Shimmering hollow teaches awareness. Travelers learn to navigate with attention, observing reflections, mist, and subtle cues. Each puddle is a window into presence that is fleeting, intangible, and compelling. The road holds its history in light, water, and shadow, ensuring that each passage is unique, immersive, and unforgettable. Lantern Marsh path stretches through a low-lying swamp, its narrow track lined with reeds, shallow pools, and patches of thick mud. The ground is soft and uneven, worn by years of foot traffic and the occasional flooding of the marsh. The air is thick and heavy, carrying the scent of wet earth, decaying vegetation, and stagnant water. They hover above the surface, casting pale, flickering light onto the reeds and shallow pools. The lanterns seem to guide travelers forward. Many who follow them feel compelled to walk in their direction. The lights move just ahead, never allowing the observer to reach the end of the path. Step by step, travelers are drawn deeper into the marsh, over mud that grips at their feet and water that ripples with every movement. The lanterns maintain a careful distance, always visible, yet never attainable. The effect is subtle yet persistent. Travelers report a growing awareness of the marsh's quiet hazards. Roots hidden beneath shallow pools shift underfoot, mud deepens in unexpected patches. And the water reflects the lantern light in ways that disorient perception. Each step requires attention, yet the glow of the lanterns encourages continued movement. The combination creates tension, fascination, and a compelling need to follow. Even small splashes of water or snapping of reeds carry farther than expected. The soft lapping of pools against submerged roots echoes across the mist, amplified by the fog. At the same time, other sounds are muted or absorbed entirely. Birds, insects, and distant wildlife are quiet, leaving the lanterns as the only consistent visual reference along the path. The path itself appears to shift in the fog. Edges blur, shallow pools become difficult to distinguish from solid ground, and the marsh seems to extend further than maps indicate. Travelers report that the lanterns appear to lead them safely along the narrowest and most treacherous sections, yet the end of the path never comes into view. The destination remains elusive, and the marsh stretches endlessly in both directions. Night intensifies the phenomenon. Lanterns glow more clearly against the darkness, their reflections shimmering in water and wet mud. Shadows deepen along the reeds and overhanging trees, enhancing the sense of motion and depth. Observers report that the lights sometimes split, move closer, or seem to respond to hesitation, drawing attention to specific areas while avoiding direct interaction. The experience is both mesmerizing and disorienting. Travelers describe a hypnotic pull toward the lanterns. Each step becomes focused, deliberate, and increasingly difficult to resist. The marsh seems alive, attentive, and patient, guiding movement without force. Observers often notice subtle patterns in the lantern's drift, a rhythm that feels intentional yet unpredictable. Maintaining a balance between allure and caution. Local accounts suggest the phenomenon has a long history. Residents speak of travelers drawn by curiosity or necessity, sometimes returning with tales of being guided carefully across dangerous areas, sometimes leaving items behind in the mud or water. Some say the lanterns are spirits of those lost in the marsh, guiding others as they once needed guidance themselves. Others claim the lights are warnings, never allowing anyone to reach the end to prevent harm. Even the most cautious visitors are affected. following the lanterns is difficult to resist. Movement slows, attention heightens, and the marsh becomes increasingly vivid in sensory detail. Observers note that hesitation or attempts to leave the path are met with subtle shifts in the lantern's position, reinforcing the pull forward. Attempts to document the lights are inconclusive. Photographs often capture the marsh and reflections but fail to capture the precise movement of the lanterns. Video records the glow faintly, yet never conveys the hypnotic effect or the sense of being guided along an endless path. The phenomenon appears tied to perception and awareness, reliant on the observer's attention rather than mechanical recording. Those who leave the marsh carry the impression with them. Even after returning to solid ground, the memory of drifting lanterns, shifting shadows, and elusive path endures. Travelers report heightened awareness of light, motion, and reflection in other settings, a lingering reminder of the marsh's quiet influence. Lantern Marsh Path remains a place of subtle authority. Ghostly lights float, guiding movement without revealing a destination. Mud and shallow pools challenge travelers, mist obscures vision, and shadows move across the path in response to motion. Those who enter are drawn forward, compelled to follow, and reminded that some paths exist to guide, to caution, and to endure beyond perception. At Lantern Marsh Path, the line between observer and environment blurs. The ghostly lanterns float, mud and water challenge, mist obscures, and shadows stretch unnaturally. And the marsh itself maintains a quiet, watchful presence. The path continues, unseen yet experienced, endlessly repeating for those who dare to follow its lights. Still tide forest stretches across miles of dense, untamed woodland, its canopy so thick that light filters weakly to the ground even at midday. The most remote road winds through this forest, narrow and worn, bordered by trees that lean inward, their roots twisting across the cracked asphalt. Moss and fallen leaves cover sections of the surface, softening edges and muffling footsteps. It descends without warning, settling along the road and obscuring the edges. Visibility drops to mere feet, transforming the familiar path into a corridor of muted gray. Sounds are absorbed, leaving only subtle rustling of leaves or distant water movement. Silence dominates, creating a stillness that feels absolute. The road appears longer than it should, curves sharper, and distances uncertain. Travelers often feel disoriented. Those who stop experience an unusual pull. The silence seems alive, a gentle pressure that draws the mind toward the water edging the road. Small tidal pools reflect faint gray light, their surfaces unnaturally still. Observers report a sensation of being guided, as if the environment itself is urging them forward. The effect is subtle but compelling. Footsteps slow, breath becomes conscious, and attention is drawn more strongly to the water than the road. The pull is not accompanied by force or sound. It is perceptual, almost hypnotic, suggesting direction and intention without visible cause. The water itself is deceptive. Shallow in some areas, reflective in others, it mirrors fog, trees, and sky with soft distortion. Movement is nearly imperceptible, yet small ripples occasionally appear, reinforcing the impression of presence. The boundary between road and water feels blurred, enhancing the sense that stepping forward is both inviting and perilous. Silence amplifies perception. Without wind, wildlife, or other sound, every detail becomes significant. Mud, leaves, and subtle shifts in reflection draw attention. The brain interprets minimal cues, heightening tension and awareness. Time seems to stretch. The pull toward the water intensifying. Travelers describe a sensation of observation. Even when alone, the environment feels attentive. Subtle movements in fog and reflection are interpreted as watching. Shadows appear to shift in concert with presence. The road, forest, and water feel unified, responding to perception rather than action. Stopping does not break the effect. Remaining on the asphalt prolongs the sensation. The pull toward the water persists. Riptides continue without cause. And the fog thickens imperceptibly. Standing still can increase the intensity. As the mind searches for source or explanation that never comes. The road appears endlessly remote. Curves and rises obscure landmarks. Trees stretch into the fog, reinforcing the feeling of isolation. Even distant sounds from the forest perimeter are muted or absent. The road is contained within fog, silence, and the pull of water, creating an experience disconnected from ordinary perception. Local accounts warn of danger. Those familiar with still-tide forest speak quietly of travelers who have lingered too long, those who stepped forward and did not return. Stories describe the pull as irresistible, subtle, and absolute, emphasizing the need to remain vigilant and avoid the edge of water entirely. Perception interacts with environment. Fog, light, reflection, and silence converge to produce the sensation of guidance. Observers feel drawn, compelled, yet no force is visible. Movement in the water is minimal, yet sufficient to suggest presence. The effect relies on attention, awareness, and the mind's interpretation of subtle cues. Even during daylight, the effect persists. Fog may be thinner, reflections sharper, yet travelers report similar sensations. Pulls toward the water, subtle observations of shifting light, and heightened attention remain consistent, demonstrating that the phenomenon is not dependent solely on darkness. Departing gradually restores normal perception. Walking away, the fog thins, reflections normalize, and the pull toward water diminishes. The road and forest resume ordinary proportion and scale. Awareness returns to normal, yet memory retains the intensity of the experience. Looking back, the path appears ordinary. Trees, asphalt, and shallow tidal water remain unchanged. Fog drifts lightly, shadows settle. No force or entity is visible, yet those who leave recall an irresistible draw, a subtle urging that was real in perception. Still-tide forest endures. Its most remote road winds through dense trees, bordered by tidal pools and shrouded in fog. Perception is heightened. Water reflects and ripples without cause. Travelers experience a pull toward the edge. A sensation of attention and presence that exists beyond explanation. The lane remains, waiting silently. Drawing awareness. And leaving memory long after departure. Where travelers vanished. Places shaped by water, fog, and the restless spirits of those who never returned. And the forest itself seems alive. You have now walked through 20 haunted Tidewater forest roads in Maryland. Where the veil between worlds is thin. And the whispers of the forest grow louder. Places that defy explanation. Where the laws of nature are twisted and distorted. And the very fabric of reality seems to be unraveling. Places where the veil between worlds is at its thinnest. And the whispers of the forest grow louder still. Where the laws of nature are twisted and distorted beyond recognition. And the very fabric of reality seems to be unraveling at an alarming rate. Places that defy all explanation. Where the laws of nature are twisted and distorted beyond all recognition. And the very fabric of reality seems to be unraveling at an alarming rate. Where the veil between worlds is at its thinnest. And the whispers of the forest grow louder still. Places that defy all explanation. Where the laws of nature are twisted and distorted beyond all recognition. And the very fabric of reality seems to be unraveling at an alarming rate. Where the veil between worlds is at its thinnest. And the whispers of the forest grow louder still. Places that defy all explanation. Where the laws of nature are twisted and distorted beyond all recognition. And the very fabric of reality seems to be unraveling at an alarming rate. Where the veil between worlds is at its thinnest. And the whispers of the forest grow louder still. Places that defy all explanation. Where the laws of nature are twisted and distorted beyond all recognition. And the very fabric of reality seems to be unraveling at an alarming rate. Where the veil between worlds is at its thinnest. And the whispers of the forest grow louder still. Places that defy all explanation. Where the laws of nature are twisted and distorted beyond all recognition. And the very fabric of reality seems to be unraveling at an alarming rate. Where the veil between worlds is at its thinnest. And the whispers of the forest grow louder still. Places that defy all explanation. Where the laws of nature are twisted and distorted beyond all recognition. And the very fabric of reality seems to be unraveling at an alarming rate. Where the veil between worlds is at its thinnest. And the whispers of the forest grow louder still. These roads may look calm in daylight. Quiet. Forgotten. But when night falls, the fog thickens. The trees watch. And the water remembers every step taken along its edge. If you ever travel these roads after sunset, be cautious. Do not follow lights you cannot explain. And never assume silence is safety. Thank you for spending this haunting journey with me. Slow your breathing. Let the fog fade from your mind. And if you see a lantern flickering somewhere tonight, remember. Not every light is meant to guide you home. Until our next journey into the darkness, stay safe.